Okay, have you ever wanted to drop your cabals on everything that moves and leave the enemy all webbed up? Yeah, I know, it's a weird analogy, but it's accurate and we're rolling with it. Think Titan punchy punch energy, but you're a hunter. And honestly, I kinda stole this build from Duck. Well, borrowed it, then tweaked it with upgrades. Let me explain. So there I was, doom scrolling on the couch when Duck's Strand Hunter build popped up, and like a kid in a candy store, I thought, damn, that's an exotic that I had completely forgotten about. Speedloader slacks. An exotic I tried once on release and vaulted it immediately. But seeing this build in his video, I just knew I had to try it myself because it looked ridiculously fun, and after giving it a spin, I can say it definitely was. Now, after a dozen portal ops, I had tweaked this build from what he showcased to whatever the hell I've turned it into, a half-breed monster of chaos and utility that shouldn't exist, but absolutely does. So today I want to show you my version of this build, the ultimate crowd control hunter that'll have everything tangled before you can even reload. And I'm calling it Web 'em Up. Nah, that sucks. And a big shout out to Duck. His original video will be linked down below. But hey, while you're here, maybe help me catch up to him. That big red subscribe button is staring at you, so why not click it? Alright, enough talk, let's dive into the build. Obviously, the first aspect in this build is Ensnaring Slam. The whole thing basically revolves around this. It allows us to use our class ability to do an AoE suspending slam when activated in midair. In addition to suspending a ton of enemies, this will also give us woven mail based on the number of enemies that we suspend, which results in basically free damage resist and increased survivability. Now the range is pretty forgiving as well, which makes it so strong in endgame content because you'll be snaring enemies you thought were out of range. Because this aspect also works with our dodge ability, it gives us the option to pick either the reload or the melee regen. But for this build, we're actually going to be running marksman for the reload benefits. Initially, I had hoped we could run gamblers because Speedloader slacks is actually supposed to reload all of our weapons, but it doesn't work with Ensnaring Slam, so we just have to settle for marksman. That reload benefit is actually really important for the build. Now, I'm suggesting that the aspect that you pair with Ensnaring Slam is Threaded Spectre. Activating your class ability leaves behind a strand clone that draws aggro and eventually explodes, dealing damage. With this build, if you aim your slams correctly and land next to an enemy, the clone can be used and detonated, dealing a decent amount of damage to anything nearby, basically turning your suspending slams into delayed explosions. Having access to the decoy clones is also really nice in hard content, especially if you're being targeted or need to break aggro for a moment just to heal. Some enemy types don't actually get suspended, so having the strand clone helps distract them while you take them out. But you can utilize them whenever you need, giving the build just a little bit more utility, which at least I found really helpful. I found Widow's Silk and Whirling Maelstrom to both be really fun to play with, but the Strand clone just benefited my playstyle more. I found it much more fun to keep it on. It also had the added benefit of giving us one more fragment slot to play with, which we're going to do. Now, speaking of the fragments, with this aspect setup, we've got 5 fragment slots to work with. The strand selection isn't fantastic for our weapon loadout, and I'll go into that in a second. But for starters, the single best fragment on strand, and our first in this build, is Thread of Generation. Dealing any damage will generate grenade energy. This is ability damage, weapon damage, everything. Every kind of damage will generate grenade energy. You should see this as a way to just passively boost your grenade recharge. It stacks with 100 grenade stat, so regardless of your stats, it's a good choice to have. The next fragment in the build is Thread of Continuity, where our strand debuffs will last for an increased duration. This means our suspending slams last longer, and if we hit enemies with the Hunter melee ability, they'll be severed for longer. And with this build, longer suspends just means more time to deal damage without having to reapply the effect. It really helps with the build's ease of use because you don't have to play so quickly and so aggressively all the time. It just gives you more freedom to make decisions, which can be helpful on controller when swapping weapons, because I know you don't have the ease of use that PC does when swapping weapons. Now, the third fragment is basically designed to pair with Suspend, and that's Thread of Wisdom. Defeating suspended targets creates an orb of power. Since our build is all about suspending, this just feels like a no-brainer. When you kill any suspended target, it will generate an orb of power, but there is a 10-second cooldown. This is the exact same cooldown as Reaper, so you can generate 2 orbs of power every 10 seconds whenever you use your suspending slam. Next up, we're going to be running Thread of Propagation. Powered melee final blows give your strand weapons unraveling rounds. This will give the entire build access to all 3 strand debuffs, and thanks to Thread of Continuity, Unravel, along with the other 2 debuffs we've talked about, will last longer on any target. It will be especially useful for damaging bulkier targets in harder content because it adds an additional source of damage over time. This benefits Thread of Generation and Speedloader slacks, but we'll talk about that in a second. And finally, our 5th and final fragment on our list is Thread of Binding. Super final blows emit a suspending blast. You already have infinite class ability while the super is active, but it does consume a small amount of super energy. So this aspect will give Silk Strike just another way to add a little bit of extra utility while still ad clearing. Alright, so once we've set up the subclass, our weapon loadout is pretty straightforward. You want Mint in the kinetic slot because it is easily the strongest special weapon available right now, and it gives us anti-barrier capabilities. In the energy slot, you want an area denial GL. Because of how it interacts with Speedloader slacks, you gain more class ability energy per enemy hit with an area denial GL. The only 2 options in the game at the moment are Velocity Baton and Psycho Pump. If you're running a seasonal conquest, the only available area denial GL is Festival Flight from the Dawning, but that sits in the kinetic slot and would take away access to Mint. So in every other piece of content, you should be running either Velocity Baton or Psycho Pump. If you don't own Psycho Pump from Heresy, then you can still obtain Velocity Baton fairly easily from Vesper's Host. And finally, in our heavy slot, we're going to be running Galahorn, because it also provides great class ability regen with Speedloader slacks, just like the area denial GLs. And it already has great ad clear and damage potential thanks to the Wolfpack rounds, so it fits quite nicely into the build. Now let's move on to our armor stats and armor mods. You'll definitely want your class stat to be at 100 or as close to it as you can get, because the amount of energy gained per hit from the Speedloader slacks exotic perk is scaled based on this stat. If you have 100, then Velocity Baton will refund your class ability in about 3 or 4 ticks. But at 0, it takes 10 ticks, which requires 2 shots of Velocity Baton on a single target, which is shit. So you'll need at least 100 class for this build to work effectively. I honestly don't think more than 100 is worthwhile, so don't worry about prioritizing more than 100 because of how insignificant gaining an overshield actually is. The next stat that I recommend that you should prioritize is your weapon stat. Ideally, you get this as close to 200 as possible if you have the right armor set, but about 160 is fine. This build eats through special ammo, so a higher weapon stat will increase the chances of getting larger ammo bricks while increasing the damage of all your weapons. The larger ammo bricks will help keep your special ammo reserves topped off so that you never get stuck without ammo. And finally, push whatever remaining stats you can into your melee and your grenade because this will just make the rest of your neutral game just feel much better. Now let me explain the armor mods. On your helmet, I suggest that you run 2 special ammo finders and a harmonic siphon. This will help you build the special ammo meter and benefit your overall special ammo economy for both weapons, while the harmonic siphon allows Mint to generate some extra orbs of power when you end up using it. On your gauntlets, you should run at least 1 heavy-handed so that both your regular melee and grapple melee can create an orb of power, then fill the other 2 remaining slots with any ability regen mods. I suggest Impact Induction and Focusing Strike because Threaded Spike has a really quick cooldown, especially if you catch it, so you may as well invest the regen into your other abilities. Moving on to our chest piece, run resist mods based on the activity, and then swap them for ammo generation mods if you're confident you don't need the extra resists. On our boots, you should run at least 1 scavenger for the area denial GL of your choice, and then run recuperation to give us healing on orb pickup. 2 recuperations should bring us on par or slightly worse than the old orb pickup system that we had pre-Edge of Fate. Because we haven't invested anything into the health stat in this build, healing becomes the biggest issue, especially if we're playing super aggressive. If we're constantly taking damage with no way to heal, regardless of our damage resistance, we'll eventually die. So adding recuperation gives us the ability to regen some health back mid-fight, allowing us to stay in the fight for longer periods of time. There are a variety of options available in this build that can generate orbs of power for healing. Running an area denial GL with attrition orbs, Reaper, Thread of Wisdom, and Heavy Handed are all some of the ways to consistently generate orbs. Now finally, on our class item, run Special Finisher so that we have an alternative way to make special outside of the ammo generation meter. Powerful Attraction so that when we use Ensnaring Slam, we'll pick up all of the orbs generated around us, giving us armor charges and healing. And Reaper so that every time we use our class ability then score a kill, we can generate an orb of power. The best armor set to run with this whole build would be the Desert Perpetual armor set, since the 4-piece set bonus increases the duration of strand debuffs, which does stack with Thread of Continuity as far as I'm aware. However, it's not required to make the build feel really good. I don't have it, and it's more of an honorable mention. There's not really any specific armor set that I'd consider a requirement for this build, just run whatever gives you the best stats. The 2-piece Smoke Jumper set is another really good option, but again, it's not necessary. As I've already mentioned, our exotic of choice is Speedloader Slacks. The exotic perk is called Tight Fit. Dodging is supposed to instantly reload all your weapons and grant some stat buffs, but unfortunately, this doesn't work with our slam. What does work is the second half of the exotic. Dealing sustained damage grants class ability energy. That's why we want to rock weapons like area denial grenade launchers, because they are really good at sustaining damage just by shooting once. Finally, the last thing that I wanted to mention about the loadout is our artifact config. There is a ton of synergy between the artifact and this build. Tightly Woven will provide an almost permanent buff to the class ability and grenade stats, since we'll have Woven Mail pretty much the entire time. Threadling Proliferation will allow Mint to create threadlings, providing extra damage. Refresh Threads so that whenever we pick up or destroy a tangle, we gain some extra ability energy. Energy Acceleration to give Mint increased damage and unstop capabilities. Elemental Coalescence so that we have the chance to generate tangles even when not defeating strand debuff targets. Threaded Blast so that when we destroy a tangle, the effect is way better. Shield Crush to buff our melee since we'll have Woven Mail the entire time. And Tangled Web because we didn't have enough suspend already. So if it's not obvious yet, you want to spray your area denial GL and then use your slam. This will suspend everything and also reload all your weapons, including your area denial GL, allowing you to spam your dodge and the GL for infinite suspend. However, this isn't the best way to play this build. The area denial GLs don't do a ton of damage, so bulky targets will usually end up surviving, and you'll waste a ton of ammo trying to deal with them. Instead, you should do 1 or 2 dodges to suspend the majority of enemies, and then switch to Mint and use that to clear anything that's left. You should throw out your melee whenever it's available, as this will get the damage rolling, and if it manages to secure a kill, it will trigger Thread of Propagation and give Mint unraveling rounds. Mint will deal an insane amount of damage and will be your main source of damage for ad clear, allowing you to balance the ammo usage between both specials. But even then, you'll start to get low on ammo, so you should always try and get finishes when you can. Since you'll have a ton of armor charges with this build, finishes will generate special if you're running Special Finisher, and will keep our ammo economy strong. And a nice little bonus to running Marksman Dodge that I had overlooked is when you do the slam or a regular dodge, it will pick up all the nearby ammo bricks off the ground. This will help you keep your ammo reserves full the entire time. This build is just great in hard content and solo content, and most of the Portal Op missions on Ultimate are a cakewalk with the build. And it even has usefulness in raids at DPS, because if you dodge near your teammates, you give them Tight Fit, which buffs their reload across the board, making it pretty useful for loadouts like Outbreak or Hierarchy of Needs. So just keep that in mind. Even if you're not in a raid, let's say you're in a fire team ops, but it's DPS on the strike boss, your typical rotation will be to use your regular dodge when possible, keeping all your weapons reloaded and generating strand clones so that various enemies won't target you, and constantly rotate between the area denial GL and the other 2 weapons. And that about wraps up this build. I had a ton of fun modifying the original build into this monster of a setup, and so if you have your own suggestions for Strand Hunter, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to give it a try. And don't forget to check out Duck's video as well. Reminder that it's in the description. Thanks for watching up to this point, and have a wonderful rest of your day.